What is up, and I welcome each and every one of you back to a brand new episode of Is Humankind Better Than Civ 6? Now, but in all honesty, today we are going to be asking the question Civ 6 versus Humankind, the two giants of the 4X genre. Well, really, it is more kind of like David and Goliath, but I feel like Humankind has potential, and people are asking about it, and it would have come up eventually, so today we are going to be talking about how Civ 6 and Humankind stack up for each other. I'll be talking about systems for both games. I'll be talking about the good for each game, the bad for each game, the atrocious for each game, all that good stuff, the hidden secrets maybe, little goody huts you can call it or whatever. But yeah, we're going to be asking the question, which one is, how do I say this? I don't want to say better, but which one is better pretty much for you to get right now, and does the other one have potential to potentially overtake the other one, all that good stuff. But that's about long enough for the intro. Let's get started with number one. We are going to be talking about the system comparison. Now, the difference in systems is kind of stark between both games. It's probably the biggest difference. Civ 6, you pick a civilization with a specific leader, and you take him throughout the entirety of history. I don't know what they drink. I don't know if they found the potion of immortality, but you could pick Simon Bolivar, and he'll just spawn up in the ancient era, go ahead and be alive by the end of the information era. These are the people that are behind the scenes actually pulling the strings of our government. It's an actual fact, by the way, not a conspiracy theory. But in all honesty, the Civ system is kind of good in a way. You could put a face to your civilization. You could pick these leaders throughout history, people like Teddy Roosevelt, people like Simon Bolivar, people like Hammurabi. And in previous games, you could pick some people like Napoleon, Caesar, all those good people. And it definitely does have its sort of benefits and drawbacks. The drawbacks are it doesn't really make too much sense. But the other good benefit for it is that they won't be specifically based around that leader. If you remember in Civ 5, Napoleon was leading France as a culture civ, of all things, which is funny. Alexander was leading Greece as a diplomatic civ in Civ 5, and in Civ 6 it is kind of the same. You obviously have Frederick Barbarossa, who has the Hansa, which is like a modern era district, and he also has the U-boat, which is a no-no Germany unique unit, even though it's a pretty trash unit, but it is still a no-no Germany unit nonetheless. So it's not as if one leader defines the entire playstyle. I feel like the way they try to do it is they sort of try to find a leader who mixes and mashes with like sort of all the playstyles together, if you know what I mean, right? Macedon's a domination civ, so the obvious choice is Alexander. France is a culture civ, so that's probably why they didn't pick Napoleon. England is more of an exploration, industrial era powerhouse. I guess that's why they picked Victoria. And Teddy Roosevelt has national parks, which is why he leads America. But yeah, the system is pretty good. Comparing it to Humankind's system, however, you have cultures. Each era, your culture changes. One of the things I don't like about this system, in my opinion, is the fact that you have to change cultures every era, and so the empire's name changes every era, and it kind of feels weird when you're like in the modern era playing as Germany, and your capital city is the Harappan's capital of like Mohenjo-daro or something. Doesn't really make too much sense. I think one of the things they could do to make the system a lot better is to actually let you name your empire and maybe like rename it in the future, so that, you could sort of pick an empire name, maybe you could have it as the Civ Lifer Empire or something, for example, and even if you change cultures throughout the era, it'll still be called that. But yeah, in all honesty, the culture system is pretty good. It lets you mix and mash depending upon which playstyle you do want to go for. There are some absolutely broken combinations, like going for the Harappans in the early game and then picking the Khmer in the medieval era for insane food and production. But in all honesty, you can also switch to better help yourself. Like, for example, classical era, you want to go ahead and take out somebody nearby, boom, pick Rome or pick somebody like the Huns. Maybe it comes to the modern era and you're really lacking, or the contemporary era and you're lacking in science, you pick the Turks and boom, your science is just going to absolutely skyrocket because they are completely fair and balanced. Now, the one drawback, like I said, for the system is the fact that every era your culture switches and it feels a little too rushed. I think that's a pacing issue, and also being able to name your empire is probably something that should be added in the future, probably as a free patch, but these are pretty much the main differences between both games in Civ 6 and in Humankind. Civ 6 has historic leaders leading an empire that doesn't change. Humankind allows you to mix and match depending on what you want to do and how your game is turning out. So I'd have to give this system, I think I like Humankind's system a little bit more, shockingly enough. The only reason I say that is because I feel like it could be improved on in the future, whereas Civ 6 is a finished product, so I really don't think they'll change the way they definitely won't change the way they work. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the combat system. Now, the combat system is probably the one thing that you could definitely say Humankind trumps Civ over, right? Let's be honest, right? Civ 6, it's easy. Early game deity, 2 archers and a warrior, and you're pretty much Fort Lauderdale or fucking something. I don't know. You're pretty much the Maginot Line if that was like the only part of France. Don't go through the Ardennes, please. I don't want that to happen. But the combat system is super simple in Civ 6. They removed unit stacking because the infamous death stacks in Civ 4, and the fact that Civ 5 wasn't really a civilization builder as much as it was plop down 4 cities and pray to God you get enough science to win the game. But in Civ 6, they kind of they kept the system of Civ 5, but cities are a lot weaker and easier to take out now. And pretty much what you need is 3 archers and a couple warriors, and you'd probably be able to take out an ancient era Civ. A couple swordsmen would definitely do the trick with a potential battering ram. But in all honesty, especially when defending, it feels like Civ 6 kind of lacks something when it comes to combat, especially compared to Humankind, who lets you build armies, right? You can only fight one army on one army until you get organized warfare, which allows you to send in reinforcements, and you could always attack in the later game with like artillery or bombards from the outside looking in, just pretty much laying a barrage, I guess, against enemy units when you're actually in a fight. And I like it a lot better because it gives you so much more strategic thinking, right? You're pretty much on a battle map, so it's kind of like Total War, because you're like moving strategically throughout, trying to get the best position to fight, and then you go enter a sort of battle map, you deploy your units, and then you sort of, you flank the units, you attack from the high ground, you put your archers in defensive positions, you go ahead and cut off the enemy from their flag, forcing them to retreat or something like that. So the combat system, I think, is probably the one and only thing, maybe not only, but it's definitely the biggest thing where you could say Humankind absolutely blows Civ out of the water. You should be ashamed of yourself, Civ. It is pretty much, it's just not even close in my opinion. But we don't know what happens for the Civ 7 combat system, so we will probably have to wait to see how Civ responds. And really quick, if you have enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. And yeah, leave a comment down below and follow me on twitch.tv/CivLifer1. Back to the video. Next up, we are going to talk about the good for both games. I feel like I've kind of thrown a lot at Civ. I've said Humankind is the better combat system, and I kind of like the culture system in Humankind better than Civ, but Civ 6 has a lot more good things about it than Humankind does. Number 1 is the victory types. You can have culture, science, diplomatic, and score, so no matter, maybe you're super far behind in science, you still have as good a chance as anybody to win the game. And if you're doing absolutely terribly, maybe you spawn to Montezuma in the east and Alexander to the west, and you get sandwiched with you being the meat in the center, you might be like, oh my god, I'm screwed. But no, diplomatic is still an option. It's probably the most boring victory type. You could still probably win a diplomatic victory with 1 city. I mean, Spiffing Brit did it with no city, so anything is possible. But yeah, the multiple victory types does give you a sense of strategy compared to Humankind, who I think has the fame system and also like the space race system, which is kind of, it's fine, I guess, especially considering fame. You could go for militarist and get militarist and expansionist star, or focus on building up your empire and getting agrarian and production stars. But I feel like the amount of variety in Civ 6 is a lot better when trying to go for a victory type. Other than that, you have more options as well in Civ. There's like 50 Civs, 50 leaders in total, whereas Humankind has 10 for each era, which is fine, except for the fact that, it's not as, how do I say this? Mixing and matching different cultures is good and all, but I feel like Civ 6 has more variety in the amount of civs they have, right? You could pick one civ and like do something different every single game, whereas in Humankind, you might have different cultures, it's true, but you always have, only 10 for each era, and then you have agrarian, production, money, militarist. No matter who you choose, your game plan's pretty much going to be the same. Agrarian, you build an emblematic building to get food. Production, you build it to get production. Militarist, you go ahead and go to war. So I feel like the variety in Civ, where you have different civilizations, like for example the Maui, who started the ocean, Or, for example, somebody like Gran Colombia, you go for a horseman rush. You got the Khmer who are trying to get a religion and grow as tall as possible. And then you got Russia, who is absolutely insanely broken on every single level, no matter what victory type you go for. Heck, they could probably win a goddamn economic victory, and that isn't even a thing in Civ 6. But yeah, I feel like the more options does help out Civ 6 a lot, and that is possibly because of all the expansions. But even before, I think they had like 20 civs as a base, which is, it's not as big and expansive. Shut up, phone, you're not important. But I do like the options in Civ 6 right now. The deeper systems in Civ are also, in my opinion, a lot more fleshed out. This is obviously due to all the expansions and stuff like that, but we do sort of have to count it because, you know, it is in the... I can't just not count it, I guess. But you have governors, you have loyalty, you have eras, you have era score, you have multiple different wonders, you're planning out cities, you're planning out districts, you're going to go ahead and you have multiple city-states, which could change the tide of any game. The different map types you have will also... Well, I guess Humankind also has different map types, but you also have the pollution system, which is a lot better in Civ 6, trust me. So that is something, the deeper systems, you know, you're going to have to make decisions on multiple other things, which I think is a lot more fun and entertaining. And then finally, it is easier to run performance-wise when it comes to Civ. We all complain about the new launcher and how it ruined Civ and made games a lot more laggy, but it is still a lot better than some of Humankind's performance issues. For a fact, you could probably run, you know, it's... 2014 laptop or something probably is able to run Civ 6. I remember I had my MacBook from 2018 that was able to run it really well when I started making YouTube videos about a year and a half ago. But yeah, it's easier to run. That could also be attributed to being 5 years earlier than Humankind. But at the end of the day, if you have a rinky-dink laptop or something that came out of the Stone Age, you know, maybe you have like a potato or something, potato-powered computer, Civ 6 is probably the best unless you want to be absolutely lagging the entire time. But that's pretty much the good for Civ. Let's move on to the good for Humankind. Now, the good for Humankind, the first thing, we're going to touch on this a bit because we did it earlier. The combat system, amazing. The amount of strategy, the amount, you know, you could just bombard into combat systems. You could bombard with naval ships. I feel like the one thing that isn't sort of fleshed out is the naval system in Humankind, although I do think that's by design. They're probably going to do something later on in the future, trying to get in fixing naval combat, but when it comes to land combat especially, it is not even close. Humankind is amazing on that. After that, you also have infinite mix and match options. The Civ 6 does have more variety when it comes to different playstyles of games, but Humankind does offer mix and match performances. Imagine in Civ 6 you were able to go Gran Colombia in the early game to knock out enemies. Medieval era, you could pick somebody like the Khmer or Arabia to get, you know, maybe like a nice religion and university. And then late game, you could probably pick somebody like, I don't know, maybe Brazil or America to get great people and culture, something like that. But Humankind does allow for that to happen. You know, you can maybe early on go for expansionist and militarist, later on transition to maybe food and production, and then probably go for science later on in the game to get a massive boost to pretty much everything. So I do like the fact that you can switch playstyles throughout different eras, which is really nice. The final thing we have that's great for Humankind is the movement speed. This might just be me, but having 4 movement speed as a base instead of 2 allows you to explore the map so much more, and the map in Humankind is pretty expansive. But being able to use mobility to travel 4 units just makes everything seem faster. I know the pacing in Humankind when it comes to culture and the tech tree is kind of off, but with all the movement speed you get, you could go ahead and engage in more battles, engage in more sieges, which I think is a necessity due to the war score system of Humankind. If you are the aggressor, you pretty much have a ticking time bomb, and you really have no room for error, essentially, whereas when you're defending, you don't get a negative war support bonus, and so all you have to do is make sure you don't lose too hard in order to win the war. But yeah, Humankind has a lot of good things going for it, especially when it comes to the combat system. But let's go into the bad for each game now. The bad for Civ 6, in my opinion, is a decent number of things. They're not really terrible or game-breaking in any way, but they are still something that needs to be looked at. Number 1 being infinite city spam. Yeah. The snowball is out of control with this one. You go ahead, you spam out infinite cities, you're going to get more of every yield due to the way Civ 6 works. In Civ 5, they kind of had this thing where if you had more cities, you would get a larger penalty towards science and culture production, which, you know, it definitely helped, aside from the fact that playing with 4 or 5 cities was kind of boring in my opinion. But in Civ 6, they completely removed that and placed in the loyalty mechanic instead, which really it doesn't help too much, because if you're just infinite city spamming, you'll be able to place cities and get them growing before you have to deal with loyalty. And if you're playing somebody like Russia and get like a classical era golden age, you're not going to have to worry about loyalty at all. And infinite city spamming, getting maybe 15 to 20 cities by like turn 150 or something, essentially means you've won the game. A good rule of thumb I like to look at is, do I have 10 cities by turn 100? Then the game is over. I could be making 0 science, 0 culture, but if I have 10 cities by turn 100, the game is pretty much over. Al she wrote, write the book, the fat lady has sung. Yeah, that's kind of a problem in my opinion, because there's no limit to the amount of cities you can have. There is in Humankind, as every map is separated into a region, and I'd love for Civ 6 to do something like that, but the fact that I can pretty much spam cities everywhere and win that way is probably something that is kind of like, it's kind of like a, not gaming mechanic, but it kind of makes everything too simple, if that makes sense. After that, we are going to be talking about the AI is dumb as rocks. I mean, my god. I feel like I'm always going up against a mixture of Patrick Star and that guy from Ren and Stimpy. I think it's Stimpy, right? Yeah, Stimpy and Patrick Star playing against the enemy AI, and they're pretty much just making the dumbest decisions possible, like suiciding their warriors into my fortified city with 3 archers around it, or maybe just buying a unit in a city that's literally about to get captured, or by maybe not trying to make peace with me, because it's aside from the fact that I have like twice their military strength. But the AI really is dumb, and it sort of is random on what they build. The reason the deity gets so many bonuses and is still so bad, like they get a lot of bonuses. They get twice as much production, 50% more science. You give this to a human player, it's a wrap immediately. But the AI is just dumb because it just does random stuff. They're not going to go for a science victory because they're just going to build like one of each and every district. When you go for a culture victory, you will be able to see this because, well, when you go for a culture victory, you're going to obviously do rock bands, and rock bands go on specific districts. When you go on those districts, you'll obviously see that the enemy AI has a lot of each district. You know, maybe somebody like I don't even know. Maybe somebody like Korea would have some Siwans, obviously, some theater squares, some encampments. They would sort of jack of all trades type of it, and it won't win the game when somebody's just focusing all in on science and culture. But at the end of the day, that AI is pretty stupid in almost every aspect. That's why they kind of have it cheating. The AI isn't the best in Humankind either, but I feel like, especially with combat and the way the combat system is arranged, I guess, it's a lot easier for the AI to make decisions in Humankind in sort of an enclosed battle space versus Civ 6, where everything is just on one map, so that is probably another bad for Civ. And finally, the last bad thing for Civ is the snowball is out of control. You win one early war, and hey, good night, it's over. Curtain call. Just roll it back. It's time to go home. The reason for that is simple. The enemy AI gets so many bonuses. We'll have multiple builders. We'll have everything built. We'll have multiple districts being built. You go ahead for a swordsman or horseman or even a trebuchet and man-at-arms rush, and you will be able to take everything the AI has built. In all likelihood, you're going to be taking at least 5 cities, 10 to 15 districts, 2 to 3 wonders, and super well-built cities by workers, multiple luxury resources. And by that time, again, you're going to have so many cities that you're going to be able to build any of one district, whether it be theater squares or campuses, and then you're going to be able to snowball your way out of control to victory. The snowball is insane after you win a war. It's kind of the same for Humankind, although I feel like with the little amount of cities and also the war score type of system where even if you conquer a city, you're not going to be able to actually work it until you get it in a peace deal. And with war score, it's kind of like EU4. You can't take out an entire empire at once. It has to be multiple wars. Snowball is sort of limited in a game like Humankind. That's pretty much all I have bad to say about Civ 6. Let's now talk about the bad for Humankind. The bad for Humankind, a number of reasons. Number one, there are no resources at all. I swear to God, it feels like I'm playing Japan in the early 1940s. There's no oil, no rubber, no nothing. The maps, it does not matter how big the map is. I've seen multiple people with games where literally just one oil resource spawns. Take in the late game, you need 3 oil, 2 to 3 oil to build most of the late game units, so good luck with that. that. Uranium should be scarce, obviously, because it's such a destructive resource and it is rare in real life. But when there's like 2 to 3 horse resources on the map, that really, that kind of, that's not right. Come on now. The resources definitely have to be looked. This is kind of a simple thing because I feel like they could do it in one patch or something. You know, make resources scale with map size or make it so that you can control how many resources spawn. But the other thing I want to talk about is how catastrophic pollution is. Pollution in Humankind was handled poorly. Probably that is due to the fact that we never got to play early modern or the contemporary era in Humankind's open beta, so they really don't have any feedback on pollution, but it is just too destructive. You build one coal power plant, boom, you're at level 1. What's level 1? Well, level 1 you lose like 90% of your stability, level 2 you lose a butt ton more stuff, and level 3 the game literally ends once you get to pollution level 3, which is super destructive. But pollution definitely needs to be looked at. It's kind of like in Civ 6, if you immediately go to like level 6 or level 7 pollution after you build one coal power plant, or maybe like 3 or 4 of those, and yeah, considering all the disasters that happen at that point, you'd never want that happening. But the other thing I want to talk about is, I don't know if I should talk about it, but I will anyways. There are a number of bugs and stuff like that, like for example, in my video that I'm about to release either later or earlier, I had to restart a couple times because in the middle of combat, the AI would just not move at all, and I'd have to restart. A couple of bugs and minor issues that I think will get fixed within the next 3 to 4 months, so really not the biggest thing, but there are still a good number of bugs that make you have to restart the game, or in rare cases, restart the entire game, like back to the Neolithic era to you, back to the Stone Age. And finally, we're going to talk about the bare bones system in Humankind. It's obviously a new game. I personally thought that they'd release more content within it in order to, you know, sort of like, it's known as the Civ killer, but Civ's already out with like 5 DLCs, so you'd think they'd release at least 1 DLC's worth of content. The systems are kind of bare bones for the most part. It still leaves a lot to be desired. You know, you go to the Humankind subreddit, you'll find every other post talking about how you gotta put Humankind back in the oven, it's not cooked yet, and that's pretty much what the game feels like. Imagine you're making something like a cake, and you put it in, like, you take it out 10 minutes too early, and the cake is kind of still raw, but it's still, like, edible. That's pretty much Humankind right now. It's still good, it's still fun, it still tastes pretty decent, but just 10 more minutes in the oven, a couple more systems, and the game would have been something that Gordon Ramsay would have begged your dead mother for the recipe over. And finally, we are going to talk about the big question, the ones you guys probably skipped ahead in the video for. That's right, I see you doing that. Yeah, go back and watch the entire video, you cheater. But in all honesty, right now, the better game right now, I'm not gonna talk. I'm not gonna say, oh, they're both good in their own ways because we should all be a family and just no. Civ 6 Anthropology is 100 times better right now. Objectively, right? Objectively. Civ 6 has come out with multiple DLCs, so Humankind never really stood a chance. I thought that I thought they'd release a lot more, but in like content in systems and stuff like that in Humankind, but it does seem that they're going to copy Civ 6's model and just come out with future DLCs to sort of roll in the content a little bit more. But right now, when it comes to pound for pound, there's a sale on the Anthropology Edition for Civ 6, which contains everything, all the DLCs and the new Frontier Pass. Definitely get that. When it comes to base game, though, like actual, like, base Civ 6 versus base Humankind, don't get base Civ 6. I'd recommend base Humankind over base Civ 6 because Civ 6 base game was that was absolutely terrible. It was not fun, base game Civ 6. Not as bad as base game Civ 5, but base game Civ 6 really wasn't all that either. But obviously, it also, if you don't have the best gaming system or anything, I would also recommend Civilization 6, mainly because Humankind is sort of, it takes a lot, right? My computer sounds like it's having an aneurysm every time I play Humankind a little too long. So I don't know if those are just processor issues or the fact that my computer's gotten old, but it's like a year old. I don't think it's not even a year old at this point. I think it's like 10 months old. But yeah, if your computer isn't the best type of thing, I still would recommend Civ 6 Anthropology. And when it comes to just pure content and pure time sink, I also would recommend Civ 6 Anthropology due to the bare bones system of Humankind. But finally, we're going to talk about another big question. Does Humankind have potential to overtake the Civ series in the future? That's kind of a loaded question because when you think about it, by the time Humankind is all fully fleshed out with a couple DLCs, you are going to have Civilization 7 out in all likelihood. So then it would be kind of a comparison between Humankind and Civ 7. So really, it's not like NBA Live and NBA 2K where they release at the same time. It's going to be obviously which system is more fleshed out, and whoever has more DLC is obviously going to be more fleshed out. So does Humankind have potential to overtake Civ 6 Anthropology Edition? I'm going to say yes if they do everything right. It is still obviously a novel game. People are talking about all the flaws in it, but it is still a very good base structure for the rest of the DLCs that they might add. But it definitely has the potential to overtake Civ 6. It'll take a lot, but I definitely feel like with a number of balance changes and a number, add in maybe 10 to 20 more cultures in each era. Might sound like a lot, but I think you'd need a couple. And maybe fixing multiplayer a little bit. I haven't tried it out, but it's a 4X game, so I'm assuming it's trash. I definitely feel like it has the potential to overtake the Civ series in the future. That is going to be it for me. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And, yeah, without further ado, I'll see you all in the next video. Peace. Huge shout out to my members, Cash Christian, Ben Ownby, John Blair, Jackson Perez, Polaris Gaming, Empyreum, Adam Mester, Jeff Utzler, Kim Cosmos. A really special shout out to my Oh My God subscribers, Robert and Overflow of Amenities.